Hello, welcome to Cinnamon Babe Horror Stories. I'm Cinnamon Babe, and every Friday I discuss creepy topics while I do my makeup. So if that interests you, please like and subscribe, and please enjoy the video. So today's video is going to have 4 stories about Bigfoot, and they're true stories based off of the people that experienced them, so it's true to them. We can't prove that it's true. And today is actually Halloween. This video is going to be posted by November 1st, so happy November 1st. And please put up your Christmas trees, because do it as soon as possible and take them down as soon as New Year's is over. That's the rule. But no, today, is about 4 different cases. They're very interesting and very descriptive. So if you're like really interested in like Bigfoot cases, these 4 stories are very descriptive. So you'll learn a lot more about the creatures themselves. By the way, I'm doing like a Native American look, so I put on my foundation a little heavier. Let's get into the video. Albert Otzman was a lumberjack and prospector, and he wanted to take a trip to Toba, I think you pronounce it, Inlet, British Columbia, and he was going to go for basically a vacation camping trip, and this took place in 1924. So as Albert was preparing for his camping trip in the nearby town, the Native American tribes were warning him, saying that there were large man-like furry creatures that were out in the wooded areas. So they were warning him, but he refused to believe it. He just didn't believe in stuff like that. So he decided to continue on his trip anyway. While Albert was camping, he was very cautious. He would sleep with his his backpack and his rifle very close to him, within his sleeping bag, because during the trip he kept waking up to his campsite being disheveled and things missing. And so he started to get the indication that either an animal or someone was messing with his campground. So he slept very close to his firearm and very close to his goods that were very vital to his trip, like his food, water supply, stuff like that. So one night, he woke up to the feeling of being lifted off of the ground and carried almost like in a crouch sitting motion like that. He was being carried like that by something very large. And because he was in his sleeping bag, he couldn't see anything, and it was pitch black outside. Mind you, he still had his backpack and he still had his firearm with him. It was all in this sleeping bag with him, thank God, because he would have been separated from things that were very vital to his survival. But he said he was very uncomfortable, and he said that he was being carried for miles, and he said his legs started to fall asleep and his body just felt so crouched inside the sleeping bag, and he couldn't free himself. He was just I'm being carried and I don't know how. How am I being carried right now? When this creature finally put him down after miles and miles of walking, he said it was still dark out, but from the noises he was hearing strange noises. He could indicate that there was more than one creature, or he used the word people, because he didn't know what he was seeing because it was so dark, surrounding him. And he was in a plateau, plain area. And he was waiting, basically just sitting there waiting for daylight to come so he could see who his captors were, because he couldn't see anything. All he could see was dark, shadowy figures around him. So when daylight finally came, he could see how these creatures looked. And he still described them as people because of the intelligence level they were showing, but they were still animal-like. But here is a description of the creatures that he's seen and that captured him. It appeared to be a family of 4. It was 2 adults, a male and a female, parents, and it was 2 children that were smaller, and it was a boy and a girl. And here's a description of how each of them looked. So the children creatures, he said they appeared to be around the ages of 11 and 18. Don't really know where he got those ages from, but he said that they were like playful like children and would climb trees and like, just kind of be playful with each other, and be kind of playful with him. And he said that they were at least 7 feet tall, and weighed at least 300 pounds. He said the female child creature had flat chest, but I guess from her build in comparison to the male creatures, he was able to determine that she was female. And he didn't really discuss their private areas, which I wish he did, because these creatures are so like mysterious. We don't know much about them, so we need to know like how they were built from head to toe. He said that they were covered in dark brown fur from head to toe, and they didn't speak like a full language, but he said that they did make noises to each other that indicated that they had some sort of animalistic language. They would say things like ook or soka soka to each other. He described the adult female or the mother creature as being meek and gentle. She had wide hips. She was over 7 feet tall and weighed at least 500 pounds. He also said that she had bangs, like kind of like a human. Like she kind of had like bangs. She kind of had bangs. And he said that she wasn't built for like speed or beauty, and that she kind of had like a duck walk to her. She sounds so ugly and creepy. Oh my God. He also said that her age range was at least 40 or 70 years old. Again, I don't really know where he gets these age ranges, because there is a total difference between 40 and a 70-year-old woman. There's a huge difference. Like there's 40-year-olds that look as young as me. So I don't know really where he gets those age ranges. Maybe he should have said like 55 to 70. That is a little better, and even still, but I don't know where he's getting these age ranges though. But yeah, that's how he describes the female creature. He describes the male creature as like the adult male creature as having large tusk-like teeth. They weren't large enough to be considered tusk, but very large. And he had a barrel-shaped chest and build, very large shoulders. He was at least 8 feet tall or taller, anywhere between 300 to 500 pounds, as much as the female. He was a little bit more aggressive than the others. Like he's the one who brought him to their home, I guess. And there was a time that Albert tried to escape just by basically calmly getting up and leaving, and he said that the adult male stood in front of him and like kind of grunted like, no, you're not leaving. So he didn't challenge him. Even though he had a firearm with him, he didn't feel threatened enough to fire at them. So he kind of accepted that he was going to hang out with them for a while. I guess out of curiosity, out of fear, and just not wanting to hurt them, but just like not really knowing what to do. So he had his rifle with him, but he kind of accepted their terms. I don't know. Albert also said that the only part of them that wasn't covered in this dark fur was the palms of their hands and then like the soles of their feet. That's the only thing that wasn't covered in fur. And that probably explains why he couldn't see their private areas. So that's probably why he didn't describe them. And I also noticed that most cases they don't describe their private areas. I'm just curious because in a lot of cases they differentiate the females from the male, and I know like females have breasts and stuff, but I don't know. Like I just need to know the whole full description. It sounds weird. Albert would be held captive with these creatures for 6 days straight, which is crazy. Crazy. And he said during this time he never seen them eat meat. He only seen them eat plants. And he said that the mother creature would like gather like different types of plants and bring them to the location that they were at. And he said that they handed him some grass, and he said he tasted it and it was like sweet tasting grass. He said that during the day, the two adult creatures would like kind of rest together. They would lay down and rest, and the children creatures would just kind of like play around, and sometimes Albert would share some of his food with them, and he said that he would get like a good response from that. Like they would be like kind of excited to try it. Yeah, it's like it was like kind of a peaceful transaction. It wasn't like aggressive. They weren't aggressive towards him. So finally, you know, Albert knew that he needed to get away from them, because eventually he would run out of food and he couldn't survive off of what they were eating, and he was also kind of scared because he didn't really know what they wanted with him to begin with. And so he devised a plan that he would pretty much share the snuff chewing tobacco with the male, the adult male that was, you know, in charge of keeping him captive. And so he was able to successfully share it with him. And once he did that, the adult male started to like show signs of being groggy and not feeling good. And he was like making kind of like weird squealing noises and kind of like crouching down like he wasn't feeling good. And this made the other creatures kind of like act kind of frantic, like, what's going on? Oh my God. And so that's when Albert took the opportunity just to start running. He said when he started running, the adult female started to chase after him. And he said he fired a shot at her, like not really at her, but like basically a warning shot to get away from him. And once he did that, she backed off and ran away. And he was successfully able to get the heck away from them. And he ended up finding some loggers that, you know, were doing their job like in the nearby area. And he didn't tell them about what he experienced. He basically just, you know, said, help, I'm lost or whatever. And because he felt like he was going to be like labeled crazy. So he, and mind you, this is in the 1920s when Bigfoot wasn't really something that was, you know, known by mainstream media. He was able to get on a Union boat back to Vancouver safely. And he didn't end up telling his story until like 24 years later. So in 1957, Albert decided to, you know, come forward with his story because he started to hear a little bit more about Bigfoot sightings. And so he felt a lot more comfortable telling the story, like, you know, there's going to be some people that actually believe him. So he told his story to a local newspaper called The Province, and they published his story. There's been several like interviews and stuff about it after that. And he also claimed that he believes that the two adult creatures had passed away by then. He believes because of the age ranges that he believed they were. So he believes that it's just the two children that are left in that particular area. Of course, no one ever like seen that particular family of creatures again. Albert would pass away at the age of 82 in 1975, and basically for the remainder of his life he stayed true and adamant to his story that it had actually happened. And a lot of people still reference his story and believe him. Okay, so now we're discussing Ape Canyon. This encounter takes place in Ape Canyon, and it's called Ape Canyon because of this exact encounter that took place in 1924. Ape Canyon is located in Mount St. Helen in Washington, the state of Washington, and this is where a lot of Bigfoot sightings have taken place, there and also in Oregon. In the summer of 1924, there were a group of prospectors, gold prospectors, that were looking for gold, and so they decided to enter in to Ape Canyon, and the names are Fred Beck, John Peterson, Marion Smith, and his son Roy, and then also Gabe Lefebvre. To make their trip more comfortable, they ended up building a small cabin inside of Ape Canyon. I keep wanting to say Gape Canyon for some reason. Ape Canyon, pretty much near their site that they were searching for gold. So instead of staying in tents, they wanted to stay in a nice, comfortable cabin. Plus, it's safer, you know, than staying in a tent for the amount of days that they planned on staying out there. And then also back in the day, gold prospectors would stay, you know, out in the areas that they chartered out to for several months, sometimes for a year. So that's why they decided to build a cabin, which is also very impressive. So one day, the group of men were 8 miles away from Spirit Lake. Yep, Spirit Lake. I got my notes. Away from Spirit Lake, and they said into their hike, they noticed 4 large, dark brown creatures walking through the forest. And they said, oh my gosh, it's so scary. They said that the creatures had 4-inch long ears that stuck straight up. Oh my God. They stuck straight up. Oh my gosh. And he said that they were giants, like, and that they had weighed at least 400 pounds. From just looking at them, they could see how large they were. Did they say how tall they were? I didn't see how tall they said they were, but I'm sure it was anywhere between 7 to 8 feet, because that's usually the height that they estimate when they see the creatures. So yeah, they're seeing 4 of those walking through the forest. And it doesn't say if the creatures spotted them first, but I think the men spotted them first, and they freaked out instantly. And then, you know, of course, the creatures were walking upright instead of on all fours, so that made it even worse. So Fred Beck, he decides that he's going to get them before they get him, because he said there's no way, like, something that big is not aggressive, so he just assumed. But, you know, it's understandable. You're in the woods and you're scared. So he fired 3 shots, and he hit one of the beasts, and when he hit them, they fell off of a cliff. Assuming that, you know, unalived the creature. Yeah. I don't know why it's funny to me. So once Fred had shot one of the creatures, the 3 other creatures ran off. And so the men were able to safely return back to the cabin without incident. And they said that night they woke up to the sounds of rocks, large rocks, like the types of rocks that, you know, a man could not pick up by themselves, being thrown against their cabin walls and doors. Also, they heard the sound of like bodies smashing up against it like that. And so they feared that the creatures were back to like seek revenge for what they did to the other one of their own. And so they were just in the cabin, basically trapped, surrounded, while they hear these giant boulders being hurled at the cabin. It got to the point where there was a big gaping hole that was coming from the top of the roof from the rocks being thrown. And it's crazy. The creatures were able to throw 2 rocks at Fred, the one who had shot at one of them, and it literally knocked him unconscious. So the attack continued throughout the night, with the creatures screeching, continuously throwing boulders and slamming their body up against the cabin. I don't even know how the cabin like continued to stand after that, but I guess it was just made out of some really strong wood. And so the sun began to rise, and the creatures retreated by that point. And I wonder what time it was when the men had first sighted the creatures in the first place. Like, do the creatures like have like some type of curfew, or do they care at all what time it is? But the creatures basically retreated, you know, once daylight began to break. With the creatures retreating, the men pretty much waited until they felt it was safe to exit outside the cabin. And once they did, they saw all the boulders and rocks that were surrounding the cabin. They also saw footprints. And like I said, the boulders were so big that a regular man could not lift and throw them at the rate that they were being thrown. Once the men reached civilization safely, they ended up reporting what had happened to them, and it became a huge media storm, because I do believe that this was the first documented Bigfoot attack. So it became a huge media storm, and a lot of people were very curious about the story itself. And so an investigation was launched by the U.S. Forest Services, I guess. So 2 rangers ended up being dispatched out to the area where it happened, and one thing that they were searching for was the body of the wounded creature that Fred had shot. And so Fred was like leading them to the different areas and to where the cabin was, and they never found like any physical evidence of like fur or a body. They never found anything like that when they looked at the bottom of the cliff. And so they were able to see the rock placement and everything outside of the cabin, but the rangers dismissed it as being placed by the men. So they were like, you guys put this here, and you guys staged the whole thing. The rangers did also see the footprints, and there were, 14-inch footprint marks that were around the cabin, like circulating the cabin. But the rangers dismissed it as, oh, you guys used your knuckles and, pretty much made those yourself. So they basically just dismissed the whole thing and closed the case. People in the community and the families of the gold prospectors maintained and believed that this had really happened. The men all were very adamant that it had happened, and I believe it started like this big media craze with Bigfoot. And so a lot of people also referenced this story when investigating about Bigfoot. So this next story takes place in 1997, and it is told by Jeff Boiler, who at the time was a deputy sheriff, and he had also served in the Marine Corps. And so because of his roles in society, a lot of people tend to believe what he's saying because they feel like it's more legitimate coming from him. And he also told his story on Paranormal Witness, the TV show. And so, yeah, let's discuss what he experienced in the woods. So Jeff was an avid outdoorsman, and he just loved to hike and hunt, and he just loved to be out in nature. And so this day, it was a beautiful sunny day in the woods of Oregon in the Cascade Mountains. And so he decided to take a hike for that day. And he said there was also like a grave site he was trying to see that was out in the woods. In this area, this terrain was very thick and hard to get through, but he had a map with him. He had a compass. And so he decided to make the trek out there. So 2 hours into the hike, he decided to take a break and to look at his map and have a sip of water from the nearby stream. And he said when he looked up to kind of look through his compass, it's like one of those compasses you have to look through like that, he could see a face. And it was on top of this rock structure above him. And so at the time, he kind of looked, and he couldn't tell at first sight if it was a human or not, but I guess he assumed it was. And so when he looked, it was not a human being. Well, Jeff and this creature are kind of having a stare down, a shocked stare down. He's just staring at this creature, and it's kind of hidden behind a brush, but he can see the face. And so he's freaked out. He's like, this is not a person. What am I even looking at? So he kind of tilts his head at it like, what the heck are you? And he said the thing mimics him and tilts his head back like that. So Jeff is freaked out at this point. And so he goes to, grab his firearm from his pocket. And he said when he does that, the creature is smart enough to get up and run. It knew that once he was reaching for the firearm, it was time to run. Jeff's crazy self decides to run after it out of sheer just curiosity. So he's running after it, and he doesn't see the creature anymore. There's no sign of the creature anywhere. He's looking all around. And he said that when the creature got up and ran, it was unnaturally fast. It was a ridiculous speed that this thing took off running. So obviously he wasn't able to catch up with it. And so he's looking around. He's like, well, let me just start turning back, because why am I chasing after an unknown creature? And so, as he's turning back, he starts hearing twigs, like, breaking all around him. Like, aggressively breaking all around him. So he turns and starts, like, running back. Or walking back. Not really running, but, like, cautiously, like, speed walking it back. And he says, as he's walking back, he hears a big crash, like a tree falling crash, which is very unlikely that trees are just falling, you know, in the vicinity around you. It happens, but it's like unlikely. So that scared the heck out of him. So he's, you know, okay, let me pick up the speed a little bit, get out of here. And next thing he knows, he hears another tree slam to the ground. So he just starts running as fast as he can, like just keeps running and running. As he's running, he's hearing trees falling, bam, 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 all around him, and trees like snapping, like twig snapping and stuff. So he's freaking out running. He finally reaches a clearing, and when he reaches a clearing, he sees a deer, and the deer is staring right at him. And the deer kind of like leans over and looks behind Jeff, and when it does, it takes off running. So Jeff took that as a warning and just keeps running and running and running, all the while still hearing the trees just falling as he's running, which is horrifying. And he's running without looking back. Oh yeah, before he took off running, when he saw the deer, he said once the deer took off running, he said all the hairs like stood up on the back of his neck because he felt like the thing was right behind him. So when he turns, he doesn't see anything, but like I said, all the noise that's going on. So he keeps running and running until he finally reaches his truck. When he reaches his truck, he said all the noises finally stop. Almost as if like, okay, good, you made it to your truck, now don't come back here type energy. So he makes it back to his truck, and he's able to successfully and safely leave the area. And you know, he never believed in anything like this before, but he does now, and he has stayed adamant about that. He ended up going on to the Paranormal Witness show and discussing it. And a lot of people believe him because he was a sheriff, he was a Marine, and he just wasn't the type of guy that believed in stuff or was looking for anything like that. And so they find his story very believable by the way he tells it. So this next story is told by a William Rowe. This takes place in 1955 in British Columbia. William, he was really big into just nature and hunting and just being out in nature for hours. And he also would feed his family from things he hunted. So he was just a big outdoorsman, like most people in these stories. And so one day he decides to go 8 miles past Alberta, British Columbia, and it's called TT One Cache, I believe. And he's trying to explore like a deserted mine for some reason. And so while he's out there, he can see like a little bit, like 75 yards away from him, he could see like fur, like part of an animal's head and fur, like crouched down like behind a bush. And so he's assuming that it's a bear. And so again, Williams is a big outdoorsman, and so he does have a firearm with him. I believe it was a rifle. And so he doesn't really feel threatened because he feels like, okay, if something was to happen, I can protect myself. So he's just observing this animal. So with his firearm in hand, he's just watching the animal, and he's assuming it's a grizzly bear. Well, as he's watching it, he soon realizes that it's not a grizzly bear, because the animal begins to rise and rise and rise, and he sees that it's standing on 2 feet, and it's clearly not a grizzly bear. Its fur is dark brown, and the tips of it is silver. He says it stands at about 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide, and at least 300 pounds. And so he's like thinking to himself, well, maybe it's a large hairy man. But as the thing starts to slowly approach him, and mind you, the creature doesn't see him yet, but it's like approaching where William is kind of like hidden behind a brush. And so he says as it's approaching, he can clearly see that whatever this thing is, it's not human, and it's also not a bear. And it's huge. It's like 3 feet wide and 6 feet tall and covered in fur. William says as this creature is getting closer, he can see that it has breasts like a woman. But he said nothing else about this creature indicated him that it was a female, even though because of the breast, he's believing it's a female. He said the way it was built was like barrel, like straight down, thick and wide and broad, but it had breasts. And its arms were like really long and thick, and they reached to its knees. William says that the creature begins eating like plants and stuff, and he said he could see its teeth while it's eating. And he said that its teeth were white, which is surprising, and that they were even all along. And this man gonna say that the creature's head is shaped like a black person's head. And he didn't use the word black person. I'm not even going to say the word he used. I don't know if he was intending to be racist, but like, whatever. But he said that the person's head was shaped like a black person's head. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Let me read to you what he said that the head shape was, because I'm not going to remember this by saying it. He said that the head was higher at the back and then at the front. Try to picture that as best as you can, because I can't. Like, maybe I don't even know what to say. William says that the nose was broad and flat, and that the mouth was like really low, and the chin was like really lowered down away from its nose, and that it had two like dark eyes that kind of resembled a bear. William then goes to say that, he was just in disbelief, and he started to think like, am I in the middle of a movie set or something? Like, this is crazy that this is even happening right now. There's no way this is real. But he's like, there's no way this is fake either, because of the way the creature is behaving. And then he says, while he's thinking this, the animal sees him, like looks directly at him. And he said that the creature looked so stunned and surprised that William, in reaction, almost wanted to laugh. So he kind of smiled at it. This man is crazy. So he like kind of smiles at it because the thing is like so shocked to see him there. So William says that the creature then stands straight up and starts to back away cautiously. Like, oh my gosh. And then it turns back to where it had came and just starts to walk away, and would like cautiously turn back and look at William like, are you following me? And just keeps walking until it kind of like gets further and further. So as the creature is like walking away from William is starting to think like, oh my gosh, it's getting away. Like, this is Bigfoot and it's getting away. And Bigfoot was, already popular by then. Like, the legend was already popular. And so William thought about shooting it to basically show everybody like, look, I found Bigfoot finally. But he said he felt bad because the thing like looked back at him again, and he just didn't want to be responsible for taking its life, which I kind of wish he did, because I know that's mean to say, but I just kind of wish I don't know, because if he was to shoot it, who knows if it would have killed it. It probably would have pissed him off, and then he would have died. I don't know. But so he doesn't shoot it. He allows the thing to continue to walk away, and he says as the thing is like disappearing into the brush, he says the thing tips its head back and like does like a loud screech that sounds like screeching mixed with laughter, and he said it almost had like a language to it. I can't picture what that sounds like. Maybe you can. And he says the thing does that twice as it's walking away. It tilts its head back and makes this horrible noise. And then he says the thing disappears into the brush, never to be seen again by William, or possibly nobody else. It disappears just like most Bigfoot cases. The creature leaves out of sight. So that's the end of all four of the stories. And like I said, all people involved in these stories are or were very adamant to their death about what they witnessed, what they saw, and they have a large following of people that also believe them and are adamantly seeking to be able to see Bigfoot themselves, to confirm it for themselves. So a lot of people believe that Bigfoot exists. Me personally, I believe that Bigfoot exists, but I couldn't tell you what it is. Like, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to say, like, and I would never go looking for it either. People are crazy. But I would say what all four cases have in common, all of them say the color of the fur was pretty similar, dark was dark brown. They all say that the height and weight is very similar, either 6 to 8 feet tall, and then the weight being 300 to 500 pounds. So, and then the feet, like the size of the feet is also very similar. And in most cases of people discussing it, usually the creatures don't attack. That one story was the only story where I have heard of the creatures attacking, and that's because the people had attacked first. Usually the creatures are not wanting to be fully seen. They usually run away after being seen. It's like they're trying to hold a secret. And I want to mention that, like I said, I don't know what the creatures are. But my brother, he has a theory that they're interdimensional beings, kind of like a demon. They can enter into our dimension and leave at will, and that their domain is kind of like the forest areas, because that's where they used to be alive, kind of like they're like abominable type of creatures that God did not create, and so they kind of like haunt the woods. That's what my brother believes, and I can kind of believe that. I don't like dispute that at all, because like I said, I have no idea personally what they are. So if you would like to leave a comment below of what you think Bigfoot is, or if you ever sighted Bigfoot, or if there's any stories that you heard of that you find interesting, please leave a comment below. And please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video, because I have a lot coming out. And enjoy November. Thank you. Bye.